It may not look like a total train wreck, but ABC News anchor Dan Harris says the most humiliating moment of his life was beamed out to 5 million viewers. Here it is.
Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production. That does it for news. We're going to go back now to Robin and Charlie.
Harris was supposed to move on to a story about Harry Potter, but instead he bailed. That was 10 years ago. Harris was 32 and anchoring alongside giants like Diane Sawyer. He was also a self-proclaimed workaholic who turned to drugs to cope, and he says that led to the on-air panic attack you just saw. Dan Harris has come a long way since then. He now co-anchors Nightline and Good Morning America's Weekend Edition, and he's out with his first book titled 10% Happier, How I Tamed the Voice in My Head, Reduced Stress Without Losing My Edge, and Found Self-Help That Actually Worked. It's a long title, Dan.
It's a long subtitle. I apologize to you and every other anchor who has to read it.
I appreciate that. Only 10% happier? That's my...
Yes, you know, it's a bit of tongue-in-cheek, but if you listen to these self-help gurus, and I've spent a lot of time with them, they'll peddle this malarkey about how you can solve all your problems by the power of positive thinking. You can get taller, regrow your hair, win the lottery. It's baloney. I mean, demonstratively untrue. And so I'm trying to counter-program against that and say there's something simple, scientifically tested you can do that will change your relationship to the stress in your life, but it's not going to make all your problems go away. And,
of course, really your bottom line is a form of meditation. But, I mean, you really struggled with other issues before. I mean, you've admitted now. I mean, I think it came as a shock. That little clean-cut Dan Harris from NECN right down the street had drug problems and cocaine problems. How did you even get going with that?
I think the root of it is something that a lot of your viewers will relate to, which is this desire to be good at your job. I got to ABC when I was 28. I was very green. I looked barely post-pubescent, and I was working with Diane Sawyer and Peter Jennings and all these people, and my way of coping with that was to be a workaholic. I just threw myself into it, worked nonstop, and when 9/11 happened, I volunteered to go overseas. I spent a lot of time in Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, West Bank, and when I came home from years of that, I got depressed, and I crashed and burned a little bit, and I did something phenomenally stupid. I self-medicated with recreational drugs. And even though I wasn't doing that on the air, definitely not when I was working, I later learned that it raises the level of adrenaline in your brain and primed me to have that panic attack, which you just played.
All right, I want to describe, here's how you describe the panic attack on air. You say, a paralytic wave of panic rolled up through my shoulders, over the top of my head, then melted down the front of my face. The universe was collapsing in on me. Had it ever happened to you before?
No, I mean, I'd had garden variety stage fright my whole life, really, which, as I say in the book, made my career a triumph of narcissism over fear. I had never had a full-on panic attack before, and once it starts, it just snowballs, and there's nothing you can do. And as you said, it may not look like the worst meltdown in the world, but had I continued, it would have just gotten worse and worse and worse. I had no choice but to do something I'd never done before in television, which was bail right in the middle.
Did people realize right away that something was wrong?
Yeah. I mean, Charlie Gibson, I got this look of bottomless concern from Diane Sawyer, or beamed across the studio. Charlie Gibson actually got up out of his chair and ran over to me. And all the stage hands were buzzing around me. The producers in the control room were in my ear saying, "Are you okay?" And I lied to everybody. I said, it was just a glitch. I don't know what went wrong. It's no big deal. I'll do the newscast at the 8 o'clock hour and I'll be fine. And I was fine. But I knew I had had a panic attack.
Yeah. So take me through your journey into finding some kind of self-help, because I mean, for most hard-bitten news people wouldn't find that route. You know, they would say, that's a bunch of malarkey.
Yeah.
I should say. It's
like, well, I mean, that's the way I felt. I mean, if you had told me 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that I'd ever be proselytizing for meditation, I would have told you you're crazy. I mean, I would have coughed my beer up through my nose. There's just no way. But then I found out that it's scientifically tested, that it doesn't involve moving into a yurt or collecting crystals or lighting incense or wearing robes. It's just exercise for the brain. And what it can do is quite remarkable.
Yeah, we just did a whole piece on it, actually, a couple of weeks ago with some people who had all kinds of chronic anxiety and depression. And one of the treatments, we had medical professionals here saying, yeah, I mean, that's one of the treatments is meditation. So do you do it every day? Or are you part of a group? How do you do it?
I do it every day. I believe that I do personally 30 minutes a day. I treat it like exercise. I do 30 minutes of exercise, 30 minutes of meditation. But I think 5 minutes is enough. I think 5 minutes will change the relationship to the mental noise that is the central feature of your life. You know, we walk around in this fog of fantasy about the future and memory of the past, and very rarely spend any time in the present moment, for lack of a less cliched term. And this can change that. And again, it's like I said before, it's not going to fix all the problems in your life, but it can change that. And you know, I know it's good for anxiety and depression, but it's also good for people who are highly functioning, would consider themselves sort of quote unquote normal, regular people. And this is why you're seeing the U.S. Marines and the U.S. Army doing it. You're seeing executives like the founder of Twitter and the head of Ford Motor Company, P&G, Aetna, doctors, lawyers, scientists. This is being embraced by an elite subculture of type A people, and that's why I recommend it to anybody.
And what are you thinking about when you're doing it?
You're not thinking, well...
How do you clear your head? Because I want to talk more about that whole noises thing. I mean, we all have this stuff going on in our head. Sometimes it's rumination. Sometimes it's, which means going over and over and over the same stuff. Or sometimes it's just like, you know, it's aggravation. It's rarely pleasant, let's face it.
Right.
But what are you thinking about when you're meditating?
Well, the goal is to try to focus on something. You're not... People think that they can't meditate because they say to themselves, I can never clear my mind. That's impossible. That is not what you're supposed to do. Just get rid of that misconception. That is not the point. You are supposed to feel your breath coming in and out, and every time your mind wanders, which it will 1,000,000 times, you catch it and bring your attention back to your breath. And every time you do that, that's a bicep curl for your brain. You are unlearning the habits of a lifetime. And what are the habits of a lifetime? Letting your mind wander, not being focused. This is why you check your email when you're supposed to be talking to your kids. This is why you put your hand in the fridge when you're not even hungry, or you lose your temper and realize later you didn't need to. That's because you're being yanked around by the noise in your head. In meditation, you are doing battle with it, and you're going to lose all the time. But the catching yourself failing and coming back is the exercise that builds the muscle.
All right. I'm going to give it a try. All right, so before you go, I just want to... You got your start in Maine before coming to Boston, and we put a little look back together.
Oh, no. Here we go.
The judge ordered Caruso held without bail. The next court appearance is scheduled for April 14th.
The famously conservative Manchester Union leader ran an editorial entitled Almost an Endorsement, urging Democrats to vote for Bill Bradley. As a reporter covering the New Hampshire primary, it's easy to get the impression that you're observing something terribly important, that the whole world is watching.
Yeah. Bad hair, bad suits.
The amazing story that you got pulled out of NECM when you were so young, though.
Yeah, I was 28 years old.
Quite an honor.
It was an absolute... It was a life-changing event.
And I happen to know you were a favorite of Peter Jennings.
He was a favorite of mine. Tricky guy, but a great mentor.
We both know. All right.
Yes.
Dan Harris, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.